There's a question most people never stop to ask, even though the answer sits at the center of how your brain processes everything around you. Why can't you tickle yourself? Try it right now. Run your fingers along your ribs or the bottom of your foot. Nothing. Maybe a mild sensation. Certainly not the uncontrollable laughter that comes when someone else does it. The explanation isn't trivial. It involves a predictive system inside your brain so precise, so fast and so automatic that it filters your own touch before you even consciously register it. Understanding why this happens reveals something fundamental about how the brain works and why that system exists in the first place. The brain is not a passive receiver of information. It's constantly running predictions. Every time you decide to move, a part of your brain called the cerebellum sends out what researchers call an efference copy. Essentially a forecast of what the movement will feel like before it happens. The cerebellum sits at the back of the skull beneath the main cortex, and it's responsible for coordinating movement and processing sensory feedback. When you reach out to touch something, the cerebellum has already sent a message to the rest of the brain. Here is what this will feel like. Here is the pressure, here is the location. When the actual sensation arrives, the brain compares it to the forecast. If they match, the response gets dampened. The touch still registers. You still feel it. But the brain treats it as low priority, something already accounted for. Scientists call this process sensory attenuation. Neuroimaging studies have confirmed this isn't just a theoretical model. When subjects in brain scans touch themselves, activity in the somatosensory cortex, the region that processes pressure and touch, was measurably lower than when an external source applied the same touch to the same location. The brain genuinely responds less strongly to self-generated contact. Not because the nerve endings in your skin are different, not because you're less sensitive, but because the prediction matched the reality so precisely that the brain essentially filed the sensation away without escalating it. The system operates almost entirely outside of conscious awareness. By the time you feel your own fingertip, the filtering has already happened. Researchers have actually identified two distinct types of tickling, and the distinction matters. The first is a light, feathery sensation across the skin. Scientists call this knismesis. It generally doesn't produce laughter, and it can sometimes feel closer to an itch than anything else. This type of tickling, it turns out, you can partially replicate on yourself. The sensation is still diminished compared to what another person could produce, but it isn't completely flat. The second type is different. It's harder, more rhythmic, and targets specific sensitive areas: the soles of the feet, the armpits, the sides of the neck. This is called gargalesis. It's the kind that produces involuntary laughter, reflexive squirming, and that particular desperate feeling of wanting it to stop, while also not wanting it to stop. Gargalesis is almost entirely impossible to do to yourself. The reason comes back to the same mechanism. Gargalesis only works when the touch is unexpected. Your brain has zero ability to be surprised by something it planned and initiated. Surprise plays a much larger role in this than most people assume. When someone else reaches toward you and makes contact, your brain hasn't sent any efference copy. There's no forecast. The sensation arrives without any corresponding prediction, and because the brain can't cancel what it didn't anticipate, it responds at full intensity. Attention systems activate. The somatosensory cortex fires strongly. Your body reacts before you've made any conscious decision about it. This is why children squirm away from someone approaching their feet even before contact is made. The anticipation itself triggers part of the response. When you try to tickle yourself, every one of those conditions is absent. You know exactly when, where, and how firmly contact will arrive. The brain pre-cancels the surprise before the touch even lands. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, researchers at University College London designed an experiment to test exactly where the boundary was. They built a robotic device that allowed subjects to indirectly tickle themselves using a joystick. A subject would move the joystick, which controlled a small foam pad that touched their palm. When the device responded instantly with no delay, subjects reported feeling almost nothing unusual. Essentially the same flat sensation as direct self-touch. But when researchers introduced a time delay between the joystick movement and the robotic contact, something changed. Even a delay as short as 1/5 of a second was enough. Subjects described the sensation at that delay as feeling nearly identical to being tickled by another person. The brain's prediction system had a short window. When the sensory feedback arrived outside that window, the system couldn't match it to the forecast, and the full sensation came through. The deeper purpose of all this goes beyond tickling. The brain's ability to distinguish self-generated sensations from external ones is foundational to how humans navigate the world. Without it, every movement would generate a wave of sensory noise. Picking up a cup, adjusting your posture, crossing your arms. Each of these involves continuous contact between your own body and your skin. If the brain treated all of that as urgently as it treats external contact, normal functioning would be impossible. The filtering system allows cognitive resources to concentrate on what actually matters. Unexpected contact that might signal danger, a predator, an injury, something that requires immediate attention. An external touch carries information that a self-generated touch simply does not. Evolution appears to have reinforced this distinction sharply. There's also a connection to larger neurological questions. Some researchers studying schizophrenia have noted that patients with certain symptoms sometimes report feeling ticklish when touching themselves, suggesting a disruption in the predictive filtering system. If the brain can no longer reliably distinguish self-generated from externally generated sensations, the line between what comes from inside and what comes from outside begins to blur. The cerebellum and its forward modeling system appear to play a significant role in that distinction. The inability to tickle yourself, in other words, isn't a quirk. It's one surface expression of a mechanism that runs continuously beneath everything the brain does, predicting, comparing, cancelling, and deciding what deserves attention.